My name is Dr. Michelle Zybots, and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Technology, Sydney. I lecture in transport, and I'm also the Engineers Australia Transport Medal winner from 2024. And I've been working with the Lithgow Community Power Project in Lithgow on the future of the Lithgow Locomotive Workshop for the last 3 years. And we have a positive story to tell. So a lot of what I'm going to say now is what I've learnt from people who are much younger than I am and who are my students. And we certainly have a big story now in Lithgow that's a very positive story, and it's got all the classic attributes of a great story that everyone wants to hear, whether you're young or old. But we need responsible journalists that are actually interested in good news stories and positive progress in order to convey that message. Oh, the Lithgow story basically comes about because Lithgow is a coal mining town, and it's a town that understands that it has to transition away from coal and into renewables. We've got a lot of these sort of chaps here that are, blue collar workers, but they're very highly skilled. They're fitters and turners, they're electricians, all sorts of trades like that that can be used in rail manufacturing. What we did was we looked around for opportunities, and we found that Lithgow is actually the birthplace of industrial Australia. So there's a whole lot of firsts that have come from Lithgow, and this is right under a lot of our noses and we don't even realise it. And one of the more recent ones is the battery electric solar train. So the first battery electric solar train that was built anywhere in the world came from engineering out of Lithgow, and the workforce, the blue collar workforce in Lithgow, were the ones who went and transformed an old diesel train into a solar battery train. It's been operating for 7 years in Byron Bay. It's never missed a beat. Its roof is covered in solar panels, and it has a battery inside it that is actually smaller than the battery that is inside my electric vehicle. But it works. And now there's been these huge developments and improvements, advances in battery electric technology. That means that we can now start looking at running trains that will travel over much longer distances in that way. And I can imagine this going up to, people coming up to Sydney from on the new intercity trains to Lithgow and interchanging to get on the solar train to go out to places like the Gardens of Stone, which are here. They're beautiful. They are, quite mesmerizing in lots of ways. And you can imagine being a small child on a solar train where you can actually stick your head out the window safely and have a look at what's going on. And it's an exciting trip. And these are the sorts of things you can see at the end of that trip. This is the Capertee Valley, which is one of the widest canyons in the world, and it is beautiful. By doing this rail manufacturing, there's also the potential to open up the area to people from Sydney so that they can have wonderful holidays and outings at next to no cost. We can do things in Lithgow that are really useful. And what we want to do is we want to do more of them. But what's stopping us is that we just don't have the workshop space. We don't have the facilities and infrastructure in Lithgow that will enable us or give us the room to actually manufacture these sorts of trains. But what's also amazing is that we have this place in Lithgow called the Lithgow Locomotive Workshop, and it's a huge area, and it's been vacant for almost 20 years. And I think before the end of 2025, we could be manufacturing battery electric solar trains, that they're passenger trains, and the engineering company that does this has now got orders for prototypes that would be put into operation in Japan. So Lithgow could export zero emission vehicles to Japan, which is a great railway nation. They're a pioneering railway nation. So what we'd be doing is we'd be replacing diesel, which produces greenhouse gas emissions, produces ambient air pollution that's not great for people with asthma, and they're noisy. They're as noisy as hell. Battery electric trains, very quiet, beautiful things.
What's the funding that's needed for that?
Oh, it's well under 100 million. It'd be lucky if it went over 50 million. I don't know exactly. We need someone to help us buy back the Lithgow Locomotive Workshop that is currently owned by Pacific National. If it's bought back and then Lithgow City Council has carriage or has stewardship of the site, it won't be privatised again. They will then lease it out to rail manufacturers like this guy here, Tim Elderton from Elderton Engineering.
Have you tried to get ABC interest in this?
I have mentioned it to them and they have said to me that yes, they would like to cover it. So we've got the local media covered, we've got the local community covered.
Yeah.
So we now have a situation whereby everyone in the Labor Party agrees that this should go ahead. From what I can see, everyone in the National Party agrees it should go ahead. All of the local independents agree it should go ahead. And I suspect that if the National Party were to go and talk with their colleagues in the Liberal Party, they would probably agree as well. Because the big push that we're using for this is not about climate change, it's about economics. The key takeaway here is that 13% of our workforce is employed in coal in some way, and 35% of our income for the economy is coming from coal. So 13% of our workforce generates 35% of our income. We're saying that diesel is now becoming a scarce resource. For very core and fundamental economic reasons, we need to shift from diesel use to electricity use. Bringing down emissions so that we can save the planet, they are all in alignment. And we could start doing this before the end of 2025. That's the reality. If enough people know about this, if enough journalists are willing to report on all of this, this is what we could do. That's how you get good news stories that everyone is interested in. And quite frankly, I think it's all very unusual and it's almost controversial that everyone agrees that this should go ahead.
It's such a fantastic story. It's a national story. It's a global story. And, you know, it's just wonderful.
Sydney Morning Herald made the big announcement about us as a potential site for a nuclear reactor. It portrayed Lithgow as a down and out town. And therefore Lithgow needs a nuclear reactor. So we had a very different view of that. We're pointing out to everyone that Lithgow is the birthplace of industrial Australia. The transition of diesel freight locomotives to electric power is big for the Blue Mountains because there's a lot of what we call short haul freight runs that are being done through the Blue Mountains. They're noisy. They've got fumes everywhere. This is a way of reducing those environmental impacts. Trish Doyle has been very, very supportive of this. So there's a lot of details. We had a parliamentary petition and Trish Doyle was the sponsor for that. I would imagine that Susan Templeman is pretty much well aligned with Trish. And I think the story and the angle with which you're coming in with this is just absolutely perfect.